Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Monday morning, the Monday before Thanksgiving. Got a lot of games to talk about tonight with 9 games on tap. Before we dig into those games, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Also, if you like the content that I am putting out, please make sure to toss me a thumbs up. Helps a long way to search populating my videos and search results and all that good stuff, and helps to grow the community. But without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to talk about Boston at Charlotte for the first game. Kemba Walker coming off of 60, a lot of points, 64 was it, points in his last game. 60 exactly, 60, 81 fantasy points. Monster game for Kemba Walker against the against Philly. On tonight's slate, I'm going to just go ahead and call him a tournament option. It is really, really tough to imagine he's going to come out and put up a monster game against Boston at 9,900 on DraftKings. Not really a price that I'm terribly intrigued by paying. 9,300 on FanDuel, a little bit better price. So I do understand paying that price over on FanDuel, but there's a lot of point guard options on the slate that I like. So paying for Kemba Walker, not something I really, really, really want to do. But again, perfectly fine in tournaments. Jeremy Lamb continues to really produce in the absence of Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Kidd-Gilchrist is out again tonight. Jeremy Lamb over on DraftKings at 5,100, way too cheap. This guy's been just crushing outside of the Detroit game. Been playing a decent amount of minutes. Detroit and Philly, a couple lower 20s, but last 2 games 32 40 minutes. So I have a lot of interest in Jeremy Lamb, a guy that can really fill up the stat sheet. And Boston at times has struggled against shooting guards. They've actually allowed them to rebound really well at times this season. So I have some interest in Jeremy Lamb. I think he's a fantastic option on DraftKings at 5,100. More of a tournament play over on FanDuel at 6,200, but I still kind of like him over there. But definitely on DraftKings, someone that I'm going to be getting a decent amount of exposure to. The rest of Charlotte isn't really that attractive. Marvin's fine in tournaments. At his price, he's really, really cheap over on DraftKings. He's only 3,900. I think he's 4,100 over on FanDuel. Yeah, he's fine in tournaments. If you want to use him as like your drop your score option on FanDuel, I'm fine with it. And then Cody Zeller always just feels like he's going to get you like 20 fantasy points, maybe a couple more, and that's about it. He's fine in cash. He works perfectly fine in cash. Just not really a guy that I'm ever too terribly excited about playing. But again, he kind of just feels like he's just going to get you 20 plus fantasy points every single night. And I'm okay with that if you're building strictly cash lineups. On the Boston side of things, Charlotte's defense actually not terrible. They have a 107.4 defensive rating. There's still some spots where we can attack. They do struggle to defend in isolation. They really struggle against corner threes. Opponents are shooting 45.3% from the corners on them, and they're giving up 1.06 points per possession in isolation. That has me interested in Marcus Morris. If you're in the Discord last night, I kind of teased one of my favorite FanDuel plays on the slate. Marcus Morris at 4,500 is just way too cheap. This is a really, really, really good spot for Marcus Morris. I know he's coming off the bench. I know with Gordon Hayward with Hayward's minutes limit being lifted, that could eat into Marcus Morris's minutes a little bit. But outside of these last couple games, Marcus Morris has been really, really good for the majority of the season. I really, really like Marcus Morris on tonight's slate. He's a guy I have a decent amount of interest in. In addition to their issues with isolation and corner threes, they're giving up 1.08 points per possession to spot up shooters. Morris spotting up on 31.7% of his possessions this season, accounting for 6 points per game, and he ranks in the 93rd percentile of players in the NBA on spot up. So really, really good spot for Marcus Morris. I love him in all formats, even on DraftKings. Charlotte ranks 23rd in defensive efficiency to centers, giving up 24.3 points, 17 rebounds, 3.7 blocks, and steals combined, in 52.6% shooting, to go along with 1.03 points per possession on post-ups. That gives Horford a really, really, really good boost here. I like Horford a significant amount. Really cheap over here on DraftKings at 6K. He's pretty fairly priced over here at 6,700 on FanDuel, but I really, really, really like Al Horford, especially in cash. Kyrie, since shaving his beard and getting a haircut, 27.1 points per game on 18.9 field goal attempts, 49.1% three-point shooting, 4.9 rebounds, 5.8 assists, and 3.2 stocks, blocks, and steals combined. It's not the greatest of spots. Charlotte is pretty good against point guards on the season, but absolutely love Kyrie Irving, especially at his price, 8,400 on DraftKings and 8,400 over on FanDuel. I like him a lot more than Kemba Walker tonight. And then don't overlook like Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward. Hayward on DraftKings, it's a perfectly fine play at 5,900 in cash. He's 6K on FanDuel. I know that's only a $100 difference, but just that 100 difference kind of changes things for me. So not someone that I have a ton of interest in. I just realized Nick Batum is 4,900. Holy crap. Wow. Get you some Nick Batum on DraftKings. Holy crap. I didn't realize he was that cheap. I completely overlooked that. 5,500 on FanDuel. Wow. That's really, really good price for Nick Batum. So, yeah, some interesting plays from that game. Moving on. Cleveland, Detroit. Let me see the total on this one. It's not in my notes for some reason. It is Detroit minus 10. Woo. 10-point favorites here. 211.5 over under. Detroit's pretty straightforward. Surprisingly enough, Cleveland's defense has not been that bad recently. Pulling it up, let's see. Over the past few games, they've had a 102.4 defensive rating. Let me double check. That is over the last 5 games. That's pretty solid. That's 5th in the NBA. Dallas, Indiana, Memphis, OKC, and Cleveland. That's better. That's a better defense than Boston over the last 5 games. That's a better defense than Toronto over the last 5 games. Better defense than Utah over the last 5 games. I know that's a small sample, but that's still something of note. That kind of has me off of most of Detroit outside of obviously Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond. Both these guys, excellent options. Cleveland is still struggling to defend the rim. They're allowing opponents to shoot 68% at the rim. Drummond is taking 68% of his shots at the rim. He's always finding cash in tournaments. It's kind of tough to pay 9,700 and 10-1 for Blake Griffin over on DraftKings. 94 and 10 on FanDuel. I think on FanDuel, Blake Griffin is the better play than Andre Drummond. I think on DraftKings, Andre Drummond is the better play than Blake Griffin. Perfectly fine with either one of those guys if they fit your lineup. I'm not forcing one into my lineup in this spot, but if they just ended up after you optimized your lineup or built a bunch of lineups, I wouldn't call you an idiot. Obviously, again, Cleveland does struggle to defend in isolation, 1.08 points per possession, and transition. They're allowing 1.32 points per possession. 30% of Blake Griffin's production comes out of isolation or in transition. So, yeah. Reggie Jackson, Ish Smith at 3,900 is pretty appealing, even though Cleveland has been really good on defense of late. Reggie Jackson in tournaments is perfectly fine, just doesn't have a monster ceiling that I really like. On the Cleveland side of things, Sexton and Clarkson back down in price. I will note that Chetty Osman is back, and also Kyle Korver is back, so that's going to shorten some of these rotations a little bit. Kyle Korver being back obviously hurts Jordan Clarkson probably the most in this spot, but Detroit ranks 28th in defensive efficiency to point guards. They're giving up 26.9 points, 7.2 rebounds, 9.2 assists, and 47% shooting to them. Makes Sexton the guy that I think is the safest, and Clarkson more of a tournament option. But where these guys are priced 51 and 5,200 over on DraftKings, 6K and 5,700 over on FanDuel. I like Clarkson more on FanDuel than I like Sexton, and over on DraftKings I like Sexton a little bit more than Clarkson. Neither guy, again, a core option for me. If I was building cash lineups, I would probably use Sexton, who has looked a little bit better recently. Um, he's still not very good though. Yeah, he's averaging 18.8 points over his last 4 contests, and yeah, he's just not very good. Um, I do like Tristan Thompson a significant amount. Detroit does struggle to defend the rim. They're giving up 72.1% shooting, 50.8 points in the paint, and 45.8 rebounds per game. They've been bad against centers recently, so Tristan Thompson, who is back down in price a little bit, um, down to 5,500. I like that price a decent amount. Should absolutely smash here. More of a cash game option, I think, than tournaments. I think he's really safe for cash. He does have upside. I mean, we've seen 44, 43 fantasy points out of him. So if he fit your tournament lineup over on DraftKings, feel free. 6,500. I don't want to pay that price for him over on FanDuel. And then Larry Nance, you can Nance in the spot 6,700, a little too pricey for me. I would rather pay the 5,700 over on DraftKings. Moving on and getting a sip of my coffee. Utah at Indiana. Utah 1.5 point favorites, 205 over under. Woof, this game. Victor Oladipo is questionable for this game, and that could just make this much, much worse and make it something I just really don't care about hardly at all. Yeah, it's just if Oladipo plays, he's perfectly fine in tournaments. Dealing with that knee injury, just not someone that I really want to pay that price for tonight. 9,300, I can find better production in a better matchup than that. 8,800 is a little bit better, so I'd be more inclined to use him on FanDuel. Tyreek Evans at 4,100 on DraftKings is fine if Oladipo sits. I don't anticipate him getting a lot more minutes without Oladipo, which is kind of problematic. Like if he were to get like 30 plus minutes without Oladipo, I would be more excited about using him, but he's not going to. They're going to use like Aaron Holiday and other guys. Like they're gonna mix some of those guys in, and that's just it's just not something I'm terribly excited about. He does have a 32% usage rate without Oladipo on the floor this season. I will say Collison a little bit interesting as a cash or tournament play. 46% of his shots come in the paint or the mid range, where Utah is just struggling to defend in those areas. 44.1% shooting allowed in the paint, 44.8% shooting allowed in the mid range. Collison is really cheap, 4,900. I'm perfectly fine with that. Young is kind of interesting as a tournament value option at 4K. It's obviously a very, very bad matchup, but Utah struggling to defend on post-ups this season. 1.04 points per possession allowed in post-ups. Thaddeus Young, 28% of his possessions are post-ups this season. So an interesting, very interesting like tournament sprinkle. Not someone that I'm forcing into my lineups again, but if you had 20 lineups, maybe a couple Thaddeus Young shares could do you some good. Miles Turner, a couple really solid outings recently. Still really cheap. Not a very good matchup against Rudy Gobert. I actually prefer Domantas Sabonis in this spot, but both of those guys just tournaments only. Indiana does rank second in defensive efficiency to centers on the season, but whenever Miles Turner's on the floor, they're a little bit worse when it comes to rebounding. Rudy Gobert at 7K, really, really appealing in tournaments. 7K for Rudy Gobert. Dude has like 14 and 15, 14.15 rebound and like 4 block upside, and that would be like a monster game at 7K for him. So I like him a lot in this spot. Someone that I'm going to have some tournament interest in. He's 7,900 on FanDuel. I'm okay with that price in tournaments as well. Mitchell's fine. Not really intrigued by that price. Better on DraftKings, 7,300. I would probably get some tournament exposure to Donovan Mitchell. Over on FanDuel, I'm going to fade at 8,100. Jay Crowder is one of the interesting value options here. Someone that's cash viable in the spot, actually. 16% of Crowder's field goal attempts are corner threes. Opponents are shooting 43.3% on corner threes against Indiana. He's still cheap, 4,600 over on FanDuel. He's cheap over on DraftKings at 4,200. Guy's going to consistently. I know I'm saying that in his game log. You look at it and it's not good, but consistently a guy that can get you in the 20s and 30 fantasy points. So I like Jay Crowder a decent amount. And then Derek Favors, for as much as I hate Derek Favors for what he did the other night, he still is a very consistent mid-range cash option. But on to a more appealing game, just because those early games not very appealing. This one is very appealing, but there's a lot of blowout risk. Phoenix at Philly. Philly favored by 12 in this one. 223 over under. Furkan Korkmaz is questionable for this game. Devin Booker's not on the injury report, but I will say this: he came out and admitted after Saturday's game that he's still feeling some ill effects from that hamstring injury, and he's putting more emphasis on trying to make plays for others, not so much him. That's kind of concerning whenever it comes to paying 7,700 for Devin Booker over on DraftKings, and what is he over on FanDuel? 7,700 on FanDuel. I'm fine with him in tournaments. Again, guy, he has 12 assists in back-to-back games. He's still going to take a lot of shots, still has a high usage rate, but again, I'm a little bit concerned when a guy comes out and says he's focusing more on making plays for others and not so much him. So tournaments only there. The rest of Phoenix, though, is really interesting. TJ Warren continues to just be a monster, still playing a ton of minutes. His price is coming up. Still makes him a really, really good cash game option, though. He's played 36 minutes in each of the last 5 games, has eclipsed 20 points in each of those games, at least 14 field goal attempts in each. 30% of his possessions are spot ups this season. Philly is allowing 1.11 points per possession on spot ups. I really like TJ Warren again in all formats. What is he over here on? He's 7K on FanDuel. That's still pricey, but cash tournaments is fine. 6,400. That's a really good price for TJ Warren. So I have a decent amount of interest in TJ Warren here. Let me pull this up real quick. Let me see something. Because Philly against small forwards is really good. They're only giving up 5.4 rebounds per game. But to power forwards, they're really, really bad. 14.3 rebounds, 30th in defensive efficiency. Let me see what Warren... because their lineup is weird. I might need to go back and watch and see if he's playing closer to the basket this season whenever Ariza's in the lineup. 97% of his possessions come as a power forward. So yeah, looks like TJ Warren, and I'm going to go back and verify this with some game tape, but looks like TJ Warren playing a lot of power forward. That has me more interested in TJ Warren than I was before, if that's going to continue. So TJ Warren, a guy that I would even lock in for more exposure if you're building a bunch of lineups. Someone that I would consider building around as a core option in the spot against a Philly team that ranks 30th in defensive efficiency to power forwards. Outside of Warren, Trevor Ariza is back. I expect him to slot back into the same minutes he was playing before he had that personal issue. It is a little concerning. The play of Bridges over the past couple games has been really solid, so maybe Koskakov gives Bridges a few more minutes, but if we're getting 30 plus of Trevor Ariza at like 4,500, I'm fine with that in cash and tournaments. Bridges is fine in tournaments, but I again, with Ariza being back, it's going to eat into his minutes a little bit. And then DeAndre Ayton, 7K on FanDuel is a little pricey, but 65 on FanDuel, I have some interest in Ayton in tournaments. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all from Phoenix. I don't know that I want to go with like the Isaiah Cannon or anything like that. On the flip side of this game, it's interesting. Ben Simmons actually, over the past couple games with Jimmy Butler, 96 touches per game. His season average was 82.4. His usage has only dropped about 1%. So, like, he still has potential here. We saw him absolutely smash in the last game. He had a near triple double in like the first quarter, first half. A rebound or assist shy of a triple double. In tournaments, I have a lot of interest in Ben Simmons, 8,900 and 9,400. In cash, I still think there's better places to go. Joel Embiid, absolutely smash spot here. If there's anyone that I feel confident in being able to crush his salary in this spot, it would be Joel Embiid. 11.5 on FanDuel is a little pricey. 11.1 on DraftKings, still a little pricey, but like, dude has 30 and 10 and like a crap ton of games this season. Like, I lost count. I stopped counting. I lost count on how many 30 and 10 games he has. Field goal attempts have not really gone down with Jimmy Butler there. He's working the two-man game with Butler really, really well. Suns are allowing the second most fantasy points per game to opponents, 66.5% shooting at the rim. I love Joel Embiid in all formats. It's going to be tough to get him in. He's really, really pricey, but that's going to keep his ownership down, and people are going to be afraid of a blowout, which is also going to keep his ownership down. So I really like him. Mike Muscala playing a lot of minutes. That's not something that you really want to hear if you're a Philly fan. Mike Muscala playing a ton of minutes for your team, but Mike Muscala is perfectly fine in cash and tournaments as a value play. 3,900. Probably not a lot of ceiling in this spot, but against a Phoenix team that does struggle to rebound, really, really bad on defense, he could get you 24, 25 fantasy points. So at 3,900 on DraftKings, I'm fine with it. I don't want to pay down at center tonight on FanDuel, so Mike Muscala probably going to be a fade over there. And then Jimmy Butler is perfectly fine in tournaments. JJ Redick, 3 of the last 4 games, has eclipsed 30 fantasy points, shooting a lot, shooting really well. Spacing on this team with Jimmy Butler there is pretty solid. I like JJ Redick in all formats here at 5,600 and 5,300 on DraftKings. Moving on, we have Clippers at Atlanta. Clippers 7-point favorites in this one, 229 over under. Looking at the LA side of this game, if they're wearing a Clippers jersey, they are in play for me. Yeah, the Hawks allowing 117.7 points per game. That's a lot of points. They're turning the ball over a whole heck of a lot as well. This is a spot. Avery Bradley is questionable. Luke Richard and Baamute is already ruled out. And then we also have Taurean Prince and Alex Poitras, who are both doubtful for this game. If Avery Bradley misses, I have more confidence in Patrick Beverly and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I talked about it last game for them. No, I didn't. It was in my notes, but I don't think Avery Bradley coming back takes minutes away from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Patrick Beverly. I think it takes minutes away from some of the fringe guys that are playing for this team. But it does make their minutes a little less secure. And that is somewhat concerning, but their prices in this match at 5,300, 4,900, really, really cheap for the upside that they have in this game. 6K and 4,800. Patrick Beverly's my guy. I love him in fast-paced games against teams that turn the ball over a lot. 4,800 over on FanDuel. 49 on DraftKings. I'm going to have a lot of exposure to Patrick Beverly. Just a really, 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 really good spot for him. The Hawks are allowing 10.6 steals per game. If Patrick Beverly can easily get you 3, 4, 5 steals, and that's halfway to value if he gets you like 5 steals tonight. So I really like Patrick Beverly a significant amount. Atlanta is really struggling against power forwards. They rank 29th in defensive efficiency against them, giving up a league high 58.6 fantasy points per game. They really struggle to defend the 3-point line. Opponents are shooting almost 40% from 3 against them. Danilo Gallinari tied for 10th in the league in 3-point shooting, 46.3% from three this season. I love Danilo Gallinari in the spot. Gallinari, cash and tournaments, 100% fine. Tobias at a little elevated at 7,800 and 8K. More of a tournament play at that price, but like if you need someone that can fit your cash lineup at that price, I'm fine with it. And then Montrezl Harrell, 100% going back to the well with Montrezl Harrell. Atlanta struggles to defend the pick and roll. They struggle to defend the roll man. 1.32 points per possession allowed to the roll man in the pick and roll. 22.4 Montrezl Harrell's possessions. 22.4% of his possessions are the pick and roll. So Montrezl Harrell continues to produce, continues to be one of my favorite options in fast-paced games with teams that struggle to defend the pick and roll. And then I also kind of like Marcin Gortat as like a value tournament option. Guy, I think he can, get you 20 plus fantasy points tonight. I think that covers everyone from the Clippers. Lou Williams is fine if Avery Bradley is out. It is a revenge game for Sweet Lou, so there is that. On the Atlanta side of things, as I mentioned, Taurean Prince is doubtful, and Alex Poitras is doubtful, but Justin Anderson is expected to be back in this game. John Collins has come back, so that still makes their rotation very, very convoluted, something I just really don't want to deal with a whole lot against a pretty decent Clippers defense. Trae Young, shooting just 20.6% from the floor over his last 3 games. He's really cheap. In tournaments, I definitely want to get some exposure to Trae Young, at least on DraftKings. But in cash, like, I can't pay 6,300 for Trae Young when I can get De'Aaron Fox for 6,100, and we'll get to Fox here in a little while. I know it's a really appealing like price point for Trae Young, but the way he's shooting, it's really tough to pay that price whenever I can get someone I feel a lot more comfortable in for cheaper. He does own a 31.8% usage rate without Kent Bazemore or without Taurean Prince on the floor. I need to fix that in my notes. There we go. Collins is interesting just because they could raise his minutes a little bit tonight. Center only, that sucks. If he gets up to like 18 to 20 minutes, John Collins, someone that I like a little bit in tournaments, and over on FanDuel, he's a little bit expensive for like a drop your score kind of guy, but I still think he's definitely someone that you can consider in tournaments if we get word that his minutes are going to be a little bit higher. I kind of like John Collins against a Clippers team that has kind of struggled in the paint, so it's an interesting spot for John Collins in tournaments. Jeremy Lin has been playing a lot of minutes recently. A lot of that has to do with blowouts. Some of it has to do with the fact that Trae Young has been playing like absolute garbage. Jeremy Lin and cash, I think, is still perfectly fine because there's a decent chance this game blows out, but definitely a viable punt option. I don't really want to deal with like Kent Bazemore, Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Bembry, not with more guys coming back, but if you wanted to punt with a DeAndre Bembry on DraftKings, you can. Over on FanDuel, I'm probably going to find other places to go. Moving on to another somewhat appealing game. Oh, no. Very unappealing game. Dallas-Memphis. Let's just get this one out of the way really quick. Dallas-Memphis. This game is gross. Memphis 3.5-point favorites, 207 over under. There are some spots to consider here. I will say Mike Conley is still really cheap. At 7,200, still playing a ton of minutes, and that's very appealing in cash. I don't see a monster tournament upside in this spot, but at 7,200 cash games, I'm fine with it. Over on DraftKings or FanDuel, I'm still fine with him at 8,300 in cash. Marc Gasol, pretty high minutes floor in this spot, going up against DeAndre Jordan. I expect him to play 35, 36 minutes. He's actually been really good recently. and he's historically been pretty good against DeAndre Jordan. Over their past 3 seasons, he's scored less than 40 fantasy points in just 3 of the 8 games they've played. So 5 of 8 games, he's been over 40 fantasy points against DeAndre Jordan. I will take that. I do like him. More of a tournament option, but if he fit your cash game lineup, I'm fine with it. Shelvin Mack continues to be like a fantastic value point guard option. 4,200 on DraftKings. The guy's just playing a lot of minutes. Like a lot of them are coming alongside Mike Conley at times, but he's still playing a ton of minutes, and most nights he's going to score you 20 plus fantasy points. He has upside. I'm fine with him in all formats, even on FanDuel at 5,100. Really solid option there. Dallas is allowing 1.31 points per possession in transition, along with 38.9% shooting on above the break threes. That's a pretty big boost to Garrett Temple. 33% of his field goal attempts are above the break threes. He operates in transition 25% of the time. Garrett Temple, 4,700 on DraftKings or on FanDuel, and 4,300 on DraftKings. Very, very solid value option. Kyle Anderson is Kyle Anderson, and JaMychal Green is back. So JaMychal Green on FanDuel or DraftKings, an interesting tournament option. Close to cash if we find out his minutes aren't going to be limited. But it's really tough to trust him whenever they have Jaren Jackson Jr. backing him up. Jaren Jackson Jr. at 7,300 on FanDuel. No way, Jose. 5,800 on DraftKings, tournaments only. Looking at the Dallas side of things, yeah. DeAndre, Luka, perfectly fine if you want to get exposure there. They're not overwhelmingly good plays, but yeah. Denver, Milwaukee, a more appealing game. 228 over under. Milwaukee 5-point favorites here. This is a good spot here for Milwaukee and for Denver. Milwaukee slightly below league average defending post ups. Jokic posting up 27% of his possessions this season. Jokic, a guy that you feel pretty confident in getting you 40 plus fantasy points every single night, and has the upside of getting you like 70 plus fantasy points every once in a while. 9,500 for Jokic. It is an excellent spot on DraftKings. 9,500 on FanDuel. I absolutely love him. Going to be someone that I'm going to try to get in my lineups, assuming stuff shakes out the way that I want it to. Monty Morris is probably going to be popular at 4,800 on FanDuel, and 4,100 on DraftKings. Whew, that price, that's way too cheap. He played over 30 minutes last game. I think some of that had to do with Torrey Craig was out for that one. But just looking at his minutes, 34, 29, 31, 28, 22, 26, 20, 12, 22, 25. This guy's playing a lot of minutes. He's going to have a lot of up and down games, but at 4,100, I absolutely love just taking that risk. He's fine in cash. He's fine in tournaments. I love this spot for him. He's just too cheap. 11% of his field goal attempts are corner threes. Milwaukee's allowing 47.1% on corner threes. If he can just knock down a couple corner threes and get him going for the night, I think he's going to absolutely crush that salary. So I like Monty Morris a decent amount here. Hernan Gomez is fine. Better suited for tournaments, just because when the hot streak for Hernan Gomez ends, it's going to really, really suck. But 40 points in back-to-back games. Again, when the hot streak ends, it's going to suck. But in tournaments, you might as well keep riding that hot streak. Oh wow, Wizards signaling a willingness to consider trade overtures on entire roster, including all-star guards John Wall and Bradley Beal. That's interesting. Let's get back to this stuff, though. I do really like Jamal Murray. Doesn't jump off the play as like a fantastic, or page as a fantastic play, but a 7K on DraftKings or on FanDuel. I like him in tournaments. He's borderline cash at 6,700. Just a guy. He relies heavily on his scoring. If Monty Morris is out here knocking down shots and Juan Hernan Gomez is knocking down shots, and Nikola Jokic is knocking down shots. It's going to really hurt Jamal Murray. So I probably wouldn't have Murray if you're going to have exposure to Morris and Hernan Gomez and some of the and Jokic. I would have Murray if you're going to fade some of those guys in tournaments. Gary Harrison cash, way too cheap on DraftKings, 6,100. 7,100 on FanDuel. You can go ahead and fade him there. Millsap and Lyles, they're fine. Millsap at 5,900 on FanDuel is pretty appealing. 6,100 on DraftKings is fine. It is worth noting he finished with just 1 rebound on Saturday. His second time in the last 3 games he's managed 1 or no rebounds. But against this Milwaukee team last time out, 50 fantasy points. He went bonkers. I'm fine with him in cash tournaments. It's fine. Looking at the other side, I literally wrote in my notes, you can Giannis if you want to. You can leave your friends behind because your friends don't Giannis. And if your friends don't Giannis, well, they're no friends of mine. Shout out to the safety dance. 11-3 for Giannis. Really, really good spot for him. Just a lot of rebounding potential. I mean, he's just grabbing so many freaking rebounds, and he does so much for this team. If you can fit him in, feel free. Malcolm Brogdon, another guy I have a lot of interest in, just way too cheap still. 4,700 on DraftKings. He is 5,400 on FanDuel. Had 3 straight games where he eclipsed over 20 real points. Has come back down to earth a little bit, but so is his price. So Malcolm Brogdon, a guy I have a lot of interest in, crushed in this spot last time, actually. I know that's kind of perilous. It was just a 1-game sample, but kind of perilous to be like, oh, he crushed in last spot, he's going to crush this time, but still a really good spot for him. I really like him. Can be used in cash, can be used in GPPs. Bledsoe, just a little bit too cheap on DraftKings. I'm fine with him in all formats. Not as cheap over on FanDuel. Tournaments only there. Opposing small forwards are shooting over 40% from 3 against Denver. Middleton averaging about 7 3-pointers per game, shooting 44.5% from 3. Chris Middleton, shooting guard on FanDuel, 7,500. Shooting guard small forward, 7,400. Chris Middleton, one of my favorite ways to get exposure to this game if you're not using Giannis and Brogdon and some of these other boys. Outside of that, Brolo in tournaments is fine. Torched this team last time out, actually. I think it's in my notes. Third quarter last season, Brook Lopez drained 6 of his 8 3-pointers. He had a pretty solid game that time out. He's really cheap. Tournaments only, but it's really good spot for Brook Lopez. Ersan Ilyasova, perfectly fine as well as a value play. Moving on. San Antonio at New Orleans. New Orleans 7.5. 7.5 point favorites. 225 over under. Let me check. Is Bertans still out for this game? I show that he is questionable and Pau Gasol is doubtful. So that's going to change things a little bit. But looking at the San Antonio side of this game, I loved LaMarcus Aldridge the last time these teams faced off. I still really like him in the spot. New Orleans, 50.8 points per game allowed in the paint. 62.3% shooting allowed at the rim. 1.05 points per possession allowed on post-ups. Marcus Aldridge, 38.5% of his possessions are post-ups. He's taking a lot of shots at the rim. 38% of his shots are at the rim. 29% of his shots are in the paint, where the Pelicans do struggle to defend. So it's a really good spot for LaMarcus Aldridge. I love him in all formats. 8K, really, really solid cash game option. Really, really good way to get exposure to this game. Came out last night against the Warriors and finally broke out. Had a really solid outing. Told you the shooting would come. It's a good spot for him. I love him in all formats, cash, tournaments. Really solid option. Very, very close to being a core play for me here. Coffee. The rest of the Spurs, If Davis Bertans is out and Pau Gasol is indeed out, Rudy Gay at 5,300 on DraftKings, way too cheap, has monster upside in the spot. I expect him to play right around that 30 minutes again. This is a spot where Popovich really can't afford to be stingy with Rudy Gay's minutes. It's 5,900 on FanDuel. I really love him there too. Cash tournaments, a lot of exposure to Rudy Gay in the spot. If Davis Bertans is out, I like him a decent amount here. The rest of the Spurs, Patty Mills just went bananas in the spot last time. The projections really loved him that last game. Not as high on him here, but at 3,900, Patty Mills for minutes he's playing in a very fast-paced game. I'm perfectly fine with him. Really, really solid spot for Patty Mills here. So if you want to get some Patty Mills exposure, I'm perfectly fine. Let me see. Nothing jumps off the page for him being like a great option. But yeah, it's still Patty Mills. He can still crush that salary. New Orleans, let me see, spot ups. Is he spotting up a ton? I'm trying to figure out like what. Yeah, there we go. 23% of his possessions are spot ups this season. He ranks in the 86th percentile of spot up shooters. New Orleans 1.23 points per possession allowed on spot ups, so it's a good spot for him. Derek White got moved to the bench. Derek White's still really cheap though. Take a shot in tournaments. And Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis. Coming off what? Two straight games where scored at least 40 points in back-to-back games. Yeah, averaging 32.5 over the last 6 games. He recorded 8 assists with no turnovers last time out against the Nuggets. He's averaging 4.9 assists on the season, so that's good to see. It's Anthony Davis. If you want to play Anthony Davis, play Anthony Davis. Going to play a ton of minutes, going to take a lot of shots, going to get you a lot of rebounds, get you a lot of other stuff. It's Anthony Davis. I will say, let's see, San Antonio. In his career, Anthony Davis is only averaging 20.4 points per game against the Spurs. His lowest mark against any Western Conference opponent. It's worth noting, I guess. Outside of Davis, Mirotic, 3 straight double-doubles since returning from that ankle injury. 8K on FanDuel, more of a tournament play. He is very affordable over on DraftKings at 7,100. I like Nikola Mirotic as a good way to get exposure to this game. How did he do last time? Had a solid game against him last time, too, so good spot for him. I skipped over DeMar DeRozan. I don't know why. 28.8% usage rate, 10.6 potential assists. He's a little bit pricey. Still love him in all formats. There we go. Jrue Holiday. I don't know how many days I'm going to say this because the story remains the same. Like nothing ever jumps off the page for Jrue Holiday to be just like a far and away core option or just an amazing play or anything like that. But the dude just comes out and regularly puts up like 40 plus fantasy points. If you're happy with getting 40 fantasy points, 42, 43, 44, whatever, out of 8,700 or, 9,500, by all means, go for it. Playing a lot of minutes, yeah. Randall is a tournament option, and that's about it. Oklahoma at the Kings. This is the last game of the night. The line on this one, OKC favored by 3, 220.5 over under. We're waiting on news for Russell Westbrook. Gave birth to twin girls. Well, Russell didn't. His wife did. But birth to twin girls. I don't believe he was with the team when they went to Sacramento. He can always, meet the team there. I'm sure we'll know at some point pretty early in the afternoon if Russ is going to play. If he plays, over on DraftKings, you're playing Russell Westbrook at 10-2. You just are. 10-2 for Russell Westbrook. If he plays, please Please play Russell because I'm going to jam him in every single lineup at 10-2. Over on FanDuel, even at like 11-3, I'd still be jamming Russell Westbrook in just about everything. Um, Steven Adams is a great option, cash tournaments, regardless of Russell Westbrook's status. Sacramento, really bad on the glass, giving up 48.4 rebounds per game, 52.3 points in the paint, 15.2 second chance points. We know that Steven Adams, one of the best offensive rebounders in the NBA. I love Steven Adams in all formats if you can afford him. Jeremy Grant is fine as a value option, still just going to play a lot of minutes. Not a monster ceiling, but mid-20s can get you like 30 fantasy points. I'm fine with that in cash. What is he over here on FanDuel? 5,400, perfectly fine in cash as well. The other guys, though, Paul George at 10K on FanDuel. I love him if Westbrook is out. He does have a 23.7% usage rate and 1.35 fantasy points per minute without Westbrook on the floor this season. If Westbrook plays, you really can't pay that price for him. And the same thing goes over on DraftKings at 10-4. At point guard, shooting guard, Dennis Schroeder, perfectly fine cash tournaments if Westbrook is out. If Westbrook plays, again, you're not really paying that price for him. I'm not going to go to the well with Diallo or TLC in the spot. Diallo's a fine punt on FanDuel if Abrinas is out and Ferguson is out. Ferguson, not sure what his personal his issue is. He's missed the last game with personal issues, so missed practice yesterday too with personal issues, so probably not going to be in this one. So Diallo on FanDuel, a perfectly fine tournament or perfectly fine punt option in all formats. DraftKings, I maybe would sprinkle in a little bit just as like a tournament option. Yeah. Looking at the Sacramento side of things, I mentioned it earlier. De'Aaron Fox at 6,100. I don't know what the hell DraftKings is doing, pricing him at 6,100. Like, I know Oklahoma City's defense has been solid. Let me see. What do they rank in defensive efficiency to point guards? They're 12th in defensive efficiency to point guards. Let me look at like the last, 3 games. 4th, last 5 games. 3rd. Yeah, I mean they're really good against point guards, but De'Aaron Fox at 6,100 is just way too cheap. He's fine in GPPs over on FanDuel. Oklahoma City's transition defense 1.30 points per possession allowed. Fox is operating in transition 24.3% of the time. Really, just he's a core option on DraftKings. I can't get away from De'Aaron Fox at that price. Buddy's price is back down, and that's really appealing over on DraftKings at 5,600. He's still a little bit expensive at 66 on FanDuel. Cash GPP viable on DraftKings, tournament viable on FanDuel. Bogdan at 4K. On DraftKings, I really like Bogdanovich at 4K. It's a tough spot for him, but that price, if he's going to get like 25 minutes tonight and he's going to take, double-digit field goal attempts and, have a shot at, some assists and things like that, I love him on DraftKings. More of a tournament option on FanDuel. And then Willie Cauley-Stein in tournaments, obviously a very, very tough matchup for him, but his price is back down at 5,800 on DraftKings. Not looking at him on FanDuel because he's like 6,900. Very nice. But yeah, that does it. That's the entire slate. I will be back on Wednesday. We have a monster slate on Wednesday, like 13 games or something like that because of Turkey Day. So looking forward to that. Good luck in all your contests tonight.